Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us at our second ever Patch DSC support group. Super excited to be here. I'm coming to you from my parents' house. At 42 years old, I'm back living in my parents' house apparently on super awesome internet. So I look forward to becoming Robot Bryan in any minute now. But I'm joined here by Jordan Benzing and Spencer Cruz. And we also still have Jake from State Farm with his Mario hat on. We're not going to do Q. This is going to be a free-flowing kind of thing. Jordan's going to talk briefly about the latest patch releases. I'm going to talk way too much about some other news that's happened in our system administration area that we all work in. Spencer's going to talk a little bit about Autopatch. He dove down into that and wrote a very nice blog article for us. And then Jake's going to monitor the chat. So if you guys want to heckle or just give us crap in general, he will monitor that. At the end of this all, we'll let people come off mute and we'll chat and answer questions if there's any good ones. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jordan. And you can talk about all the super happy, fun patches that came out on Tuesday.
Hey, Ryan. So in the news of patches that came out this most recently, there's nothing too terribly alarming other than, oh my goodness, so many changes to things like Brian's going to talk about later. This month, we didn't see a massive number of, oh goodness, security things that came about. What we have seen is a massive preparation around goodbye Server 2012. A little bit of fear from some hardening around Kerberos. There's going to be some items that are coming around that are addressing the finalized rounding ups for Kerberos for servers. But the big one, I think, out of everything is just this is the end for Server 2012. So if you still have Server 2012 patch servers out there in your environment, it's all over but the crying now. There are going to be no more patches. Pour one out for the sysadmins who are still running around with Server 2012. In regards to some third-party patches, as well as just some general vulnerabilities that have been out there over the past month, Patch My PC has released 1,912 new third-party updates. Of those 1,912, there were 233 CVEs that were addressed by them. And of those 233 CVEs that were addressed, 224 of them were critical. Now, one of those that I do want to touch on has been the resurgence of everybody's favorite patch, shall we say, good old Google Chrome. Last month, we chatted a little bit about a particular patch from Google Chrome. It was a CVE 2023-4863. Again, that is CVE 2023-4863. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat here for people so they've got it. That CVE was originally released in an attempt to address something that was called the libwebp library. They then released another CVE called CVE 2023-5129. There was a lot of noise, shall we say, that came up and around on this. The big reason from what we found so far in doing research as to why the CVE was released twice was because of the fact that this is a vulnerability that is found specifically in some sub-libraries and not within the product itself. The original vulnerability, 2023-4863, was very much so targeted and focused around the Google product suite. And then Google wanted to resubmit it because of the fact that it was not just the Chromium branch effectively. It was anything that was powered by any of those underlying components for it. There's a massive number of lists of different products that are out there. Wikipedia, actually, surprisingly enough, for those of you who still use Wikipedia, actually has a really good list of them. Things like 1Password, Microsoft Firefox, Opera, Edge, basically anything, a bunch of the Electron apps, the entirety of Electron app suite as well. All of those are things that were impacted by this. One other particular patch of note that did come out over this past month on the third-party side of things was 7-Zip. 7-Zip released a patch that did not include the CVE metadata originally attached to its release data. They reserved the CVE from it. And the patch initially, when it was first released, there was no correlation of that CVE to it. That has since been re-updated, and I will get the CVE number while Brian's talking here and put it in here because I just realized I didn't put it down in my notes. But effectively, it is I know, shame. It is a 0-day vulnerability to start thinking about, but it may not be categorized properly right off the bat in a lot of different vulnerability scan tools or different patching engines and things of that nature. So just be conscious. I believe it is 1.7.30. I'll get the exact version number of it and the CVE version of it for you here in a moment and put it in the chat. And that is everything that I've got for Patch Roundup. Mr. Bryan, over to you.
All right. I'm going to do a stupid thing and try and share a window, which is going to go just perfectly because
your internet can handle it, Brian. I've got faith.
Yeah. I'm less certain, but I should be sharing my window, and we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of some of recent updates, and then we're going to talk about some news in system administration in general. So there's kind of a surprising number of let's say impacts this month for and quirks, let's say, to the patch releases on Tuesday. The first, but and by far probably one of the least, is that Microsoft has changed the default font. So if you have Outlook and Word users that are super attentive, shall we say, they will notice that the default font has changed from Calibri to Aptos. Again, this is one of those things that isn't a big impact, but you always have those people that are super, super picky about these things and wondering why that happened. And Microsoft did talk about, they told us in theory that they were doing this. I don't think most people would have heard the message. I certainly hadn't. So it has thrown, I have heard of people, a few orgs be like, wait a minute, did this really happen? It's like, yeah, it totally did. Totally did. That was intentional. The other thing I want to talk about here is we have a, Azure Arc. So on your servers, Azure Arc has been added. So this latest CU is that? No, it's not there. The latest cumulative update for Windows 2022 and I think 2019 added an optional feature called Azure Arc. It's a feature on demand within Windows to connect your server to Azure Arc. But what's sort of concerning, shall we say, is that they have. And I thought I had a screenshot of it. I'm going to go.
I threw it in the chat for you, Brian.
Oh, did you? Thanks. Yeah, it's actually stuff is going to show up in the UI. So when you after the update and you log into that server, you're actually going to see a little toast notification that says, "Hey, you should connect. You should set up Azure Arc or get connect this server to your existing Azure Arc." So that's it's always concerning. People get when Microsoft kind of throw those things over the fence. So this search box so Microsoft has changed or modified how the search box shows up in the start menu, and that's okay. But what they are, the latest update is now showing users an option to keep that change, and you're seeing the screenshot here, and there's a Reddit thread here where there's the Azure Arc one. There we go. This is what it's looked like, and so it's prompting users. And if you go ahead and go on Twitter, and you can find this thread, and there's basically a reg key that you can go set, and that will prevent users from getting prompted. Again, this is the October cumulative updates for Windows 10 and Windows 11 are throwing prompts up to users, and people are sort of kind of pissy about that.
And just to go back to that, Brian, it's even if you set the reg value to hide it, it's still showing, right?
So there's right. So I mean, there was good question, Jim. There was a reg key, and there is a reg key, and I think a GPO as well that says, "Hey, I'm going to enable or disable the search box," right? And so administrators have decided, or to set or not set that reg key, whatever the thing is. And this update comes in and says, "Hey, we've changed the search bar," and prompts the user. There's actually we found a second reg key. So there's another reg key that actually we believe, controls whether or not the user gets prompted, right? So all of this to say, if you are concerned about your users getting prompted, getting this prompt, and calling in and creating tickets for an org, go ahead and take a look at that thread, because there's a second set of wrench keys you would want to set, and the thing is you want to set them before you apply the patches. So it is, here we are 2 days post patch releases. You will want to probably move quickly on that. Moving along, this kind of gets into what Jordan alluded to. There's been a long tail here for about a year of Microsoft has been hardening Kerberos. And this month, what the key thing is that this month is final full enforcement. So at this point, if you have anything that is going to break because of this, you're going to find out basically this month. So this has been a year-long process with multiple phases, and you could opt out of the fixes and make your stuff work. And that's going to go away this week, this month in these patches. And if you need to, you should pay extra attention, I guess is what I'm saying, to these particular factors. Moving along, Microsoft released a standalone servicing stack update, which is slightly confusing, or might be confusing. And this is an update to the old servicing stack standalone that they had to publish in 2205. So the brief history here is that when Microsoft combined the servicing stack update into the cumulative update, they kind of screwed it up. And then they were like, oh, well, you have to, they made the cumulative update be a prereq on the next cumulative update, and it got messy. And so we convinced them that what they needed to do was they have to release a standalone servicing stack update that wouldn't get superseded and deprecated for people that are starting from the original media. So if you download the original media, like let's say you're a big OEM like HP or Lenovo, and you are maintaining building your own image from the original release to manufacturing ISOs. This is basically the servicing stack update. This is the first thing you would want to install now. But the key thing here is that this October servicing stack update is still in the cumulative update. So as an administrator, you don't really need to do anything here. This really isn't for broad distribution, I don't think. But it is marked as a security update. So it is going to get probably caught by a lot of ADRs, and people are going to sort of pay attention to the wait, why does this thing exist? Even the KB article for this basically says, hey, this is for OEMs and so forth. We also have another wrinkle this month is that the cumulative updates for .NET, they are not security updates. This, believe it or not, actually happens every once in a while. Microsoft will release some updates, and they don't contain security fixes. So in this case, for October's .NET framework updates, there's only quality fixes, but there's no security fixes. Now I bring this up because it sets this weird situation where these updates actually do not. Oh, maybe that's not going to show because it's in a different window. But this October update doesn't supersede the previous two updates because they're security updates. And so if you look at August and September's cumulative update for .NET, it is not superseded by October's, and that is intentional because last month's were classified as security. This month's is only classified as updates. So even though this update is indeed fully cumulative and contains the security fixes from September and August, it's not marked that way. And so Microsoft has chosen not to supersede them in this way because they don't want the latest update, the latest security update, to be marked as superseded. Again, it's actually not something you need to worry about, other than just know that if you're only installing security updates, you're not going to see one this month because there is no security update for .NET. Oh yeah, so that's all I have in terms of patching news. There's more news. I just want to check in and make sure that Jake, can you yell at me to make sure that you can still hear me and that I'm not just talking to the void?
You sound fantastic, Bryan.
Lovely, lovely, and you look beautiful, if I may say so myself. Yes. So now we're going to get into straight on news, and this is just general what's happening in our wonderful system administrative space. The big one, VB script. Let's all pour one out, along with Server 2012 and 2012 R2. So goes VB script. Now this is deprecated. What Microsoft is doing is kind of what they've done with .NET 3.5, which is they're going to make this a feature on demand in Windows 11. And initially, it should be optionally turned on. So what that just means is a base install of Windows 11 will no longer have VB script enabled. You would have to go in and use DISM or some other automation to actually enable or install the VB script functionality. This is a lot like you've had to do for .NET 3.5, or if you're using close your ears, Jordan, SMB 1.0, whatever. You can still go enable those things, or Telnet, the Telnet client. These are all featured in demand. So VB script is moving that way. So it's considered deprecated, but it's also really easy to enable. And so it's not going away per se, because I mean we still are living with .NET 3.5, but it is no longer going to be part of the pre-installed in the OS system. And just so that we have a moment of silence for our own Ben Reeder, who is super broken up about this, completely inconsolable. So send him your thoughts and prayers, because he is going to miss his VB script so hard, so very hard. Moving along, yes.
I want to add one other thing too here. It's so easily forgotten about is one of the big things. If you're still doing OSD in particular, if you're doing OSD, there's a massive amount of MDT underlying it. And if you're doing OSD with MDT integrations in your config manager environment, there's a massive amount of stuff that is reliant on VB script. And the new ADK, which I think you're probably about to talk about here since you have ADK up on your screen, does not include VB script anymore. It is ripped out. It is gone. It is dead forever from that perspective. So OSD for newer versions of the OS with the newer versions of the ADK is going to get very weird very fast.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me go ahead and right there. You're spot on. So I think pretty much all of MDT is built on like VB scripts. And there is a I don't have this link up, but I know that there's a group of people that have sort of been poking away at making it PowerShell based.
It's done.
Is it done?
It's done. It works. You can actually do it over the internet too. There's some installations and way to do it like over the internet and stuff too. It works.
Right. But a lot of people have taken within Config Manager, integrated with the MDT. There's a bunch of sort of cool, awesome scripty stuff that it provides you. But just know that, MDT itself kind of in a lot of those scripts is broken by this removal or deprecation, if you will, of VB script. And of course, Jordan Ardenmark was way ahead of the ball here, and late last month posted has a post here on how you could go ahead and basically fix this, right? So here's how you can go and re-enable. I mean, this is what I was talking earlier, right? Like it's a feature on demand, so you can go into WinPE and you can enable that VB script, and that should go ahead and fix all of those things. Now,
can you throw that link in the chat, by the way, Bryan? I don't unfortunately have that one.
I definitely gave it to you in another thing, and so you can throw it in the chat.
You definitely don't have that. Oh, never mind, I found it. Imagine if I could read.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
It's it's what I think of every night. What if Jacob could read? What a world we live in.
If only.
If only. So there's actually this kind of interesting catch-22. Because what Microsoft did, and part of the reason that Johan had to make that post, is because Microsoft released a new version of the ADK. specifically last month. And really what they were changing here in the ADK is updating the version of Windows that WinPE is based on. Now, why did they do that? They did that because of this. This is another sort of long-running issue within security issue that Microsoft has slowly but surely rolling through a timeline to fix. And I want to see, there's actually a timeline somewhere here. And crucially, what happened is, yeah, there we go. There's the timing of updates. Is that Microsoft, like at some point in the last 2 years, lost some important signing keys that were related to Secure Boot. Secure Boot being the technology that makes sure only certain the hardware only allows certain OSs, signed OSs, to boot. And Microsoft literally lost the keys to the kingdom. And the only safe thing to do at that point was to stop trusting anything signed by those lost keys, which is what they did. And in doing so, they broke all existing update media. So all of your boot images and config manager, NDT, WinPE, like anything, this July, in theory, started breaking, unless you went and did a whole DISM thing, which Johan also had instructions on how to do, and you go update your boot media. Now, the easiest thing was for Microsoft to release a new version of the ADK, and that's what they've done, right? So if you were waiting out on Microsoft to provide a better solution for that, they have done so. That is to go install the new ADK and rebuild, and then have config manager or whatever process you're using recreate your boot images, and that will now include the latest secure boot the latest WinPE that has the correct and new signed with the new secure the new keys for secure boot, and they will work. But the corollary is now it's catch-22. It removes VBScript. So then if you need VBScript, now you're still back to having to go do DISM and do ugly things. So it's kind of pick your poison at this point. But just wanted to let you know. Microsoft also released a hotfix. They released a new version. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But they did release a hotfix for 2303 current branch, and it very specifically had one thing they were trying to fix, and it's the thing we talked about last month. This whole Windows 11 fails to detect updates, and it's all because config manager was trying to configure secure. I was about to say secure boot, dual scan, or it's not even dual scan. Bryan, get it together. Scan source policies. So config manager is trying to configure the local client for scan source to make sure that your updates are all pointed to WSUS, or config manager to make sure that your driver, your feature updates, and your quality updates are all pointed at WSUS. But they kind of screwed it up, and they weren't setting this one key, which is what they're talking about right here, this H key. They weren't setting that correctly. And it created this sort of dual scan-like behavior where people weren't getting updates from config manager, and things were yellowing itself up to Windows Update. They released this KV to fix it, but unfortunately, then they almost immediately pulled it. So there's a fix for the fix coming, but I don't know when exactly that is going to be out. So just a heads up, they released a fix and then they immediately pulled it, and that is why. But in the meantime, they've also released a whole new version of config manager itself. So 2309 is released, almost right on schedule. There's a lot of kind of nice goodness in here. We're kind of running late, so I'm not going to go through these super in detail. The one thing I actually want to call out here are two things, is that they are now relying on the SQL OWC driver. So before, it was some native SQL thing that you had to have installed. But you are going to have to go install this, and you're going to have to do it yourself. The actual upgrade will fail, and it will tell you. It will tell you that it's failing a prerequisite check. But if you decide, well, to ignore that prerequisite check, the update will absolutely 100% fail. So you need to, before you go and push this 2309 into your environment, you need to go read this. You need to go download the OWC SQL Server drivers for 18.1 or later and go install those. The other thing I want to call out here is the very bottom thing, that there's a new, they've made a change to the cloud management gateway. Very specifically, Microsoft used to have it's confusing because they're using internal language, and we try to get them to clear this up. But before, when you used to create a CMG, Microsoft actually had their own kind of first party behind the scenes application that they were using, that they were running, and they were using to map your tenant and your user to the CMG, to the web app essentially that's in Azure, to make all of this connection work. And they wanted to get out of that. They didn't want to have their own first party app. I believe it was actually kind of like a security sort of internal security exception that they had to continually take, and they're just not going to take it anymore. And so this process for creating a CMG has changed, and it really changes in a way that aligns with how you would do most other Azure Cody things, like even our own Patch My PC. Like if you want to connect to Azure, you go create, you have to go create. There's a process you go through to create an app, a web app in Azure, and you connect it and authorize it, all those things. And so the CMG at this point is more or less just falling in line with those other sort of standard practices. Why I want to think, if you have an existing CMG, there's nothing you need to do. So it will in theory continue to work upon the 2309 upgrade. However, there is a process listing out here that to go in and to update that app. If you ever need to change the CMG, an existing CMG, that change might fail. You may not be able to reconfigure it. I'm not even sure if you'd be able to remove it without first going and updating it in this manner. At least that's what I'm hearing from the product team. So those are the two things to be aware of. There are some other interesting goodies in there. The one that, I guess I can't help but call out is that the config manager will now use the built-in Windows 11 update experience. So that is, if you're used to the Windows Update for Business user experience, you can now actually use that within Config Manager. So Config Manager has always had its own user experience, for good or ill. There's reasons to use both. The main reason for using the built-in experience is that it's the experience that people are used to at home, right? So most people have Windows 10 and Windows 11 machines at home. They're used to the UI, or the user experience for an update being needed to install and a reboot and all those things. And this allows you just to use the native experience instead of Config Manager's own experience. So next, we're going to move on to Intune. Again, lots of stuff has happened here. I'm just going to kind of pick out some of the highlights. I know a lot of people were cheered when MAM for Windows is GA'd. So this very specifically, as I understand it right now, this allows unmanaged Windows devices within Edge to go ahead and securely access your company resources. So if you have people working from home and they have a BYOD device and they want to hook into some of your cloud solutions to do some work, they don't necessarily have to fully onboard that device and make it a corporate device for you to set some policies that allows you to protect your data. Now, this is, MAM has existed for mobile apps for quite some time. Mobile devices, Android and iOS, obviously, for quite some time. But this is now coming to Windows, and there's a fair number of people that are rejoicing on this. The second thing I'm going to call out, if I can find it here, I'll just search, is config refresh. Yeah, there you go. So this is currently only for Windows insiders, but it's basically just saying, historically, what happens is your device reaches out to Intune to connect into managed device, checks out, gets the policies, and only kind of applies them if it finds a difference. There's actually now this setting that you can refresh every on a cadence, right? You can configure the device and say, hey, I don't care if you're talking to Intune right now or not. Maybe you're offline, right? Maybe you're literally in the submarine right now and you have no internet connectivity. Every so often, I want you to go apply, just make sure that your policies are set the way that they're supposed to be. Make sure that somebody hasn't come in, come into that device and created some drift. And so that's exciting. Remote help has gotten a couple of updates, which is nice to see. So we now have some more support for Mac OS. So you can this is in the Intune suite. You can only view currently, and they also have some preview support for some Android dedicated devices. Now, what this really means is if you have some very specific devices from Zebra and Samsung that are Android based, you can now use remote help to connect to those devices. Lastly, Win32 app configurable installation time. So you can now specify how long a maximum runtime, if you will, for the install of a Windows 32 app. The last thing I want to talk about, there we go, is sort of speculative, and it's really just kind of forward-looking. Fellow MVP Rudy Ooms has been talking a lot about this, but this is, and there's no connection into Intune yet, but Microsoft has been posted these docs about declared configuration protocol, and this is sort of OMA based, but it's also kind of not. This is a separate, whole new protocol behind the scenes that Microsoft is releasing and starting to use that allows for some really interesting new things they could build on top of it. It is a more responsive protocol. It's not. I don't know that it's quite real time between the client and in Intune, but the privilege management system, the enterprise EPM is built on top of this new protocol, and it's kind of, this protocol also kind of brings like it sounds and feels like desired state configuration, which is sort of feels kind of dead on the server side, but they're bringing it back here, and so it's something just to keep an eye on. I guess I would say I think we're going to see more and more things built upon this new protocol as they roll out. So again, just something if you're super nerdy and want to go dig into, go ahead and start reading, because I think it's sort of Rudy is super big on this being the future of Intune management, and I think he could be right. All right, now after hogging a solid half hour, I'll hand it over to Spencer. Spencer, you wrote a blog. What'd you write?
Yes.
What'd you find? And why'd you write it? Why did you write it other than a contractual obligation?
I wrote it because I was primarily interested in the technology. So I really enjoy Intune, been administering it for about 6 years or so, and never really got into Autopatch until I went through this blog. So I wrote this. This is like my process of completely setting it up from scratch. So if you guys are completely new to Autopilot or don't really understand what the service is, this will walk you through a complete overview of exactly what it is, everything you need to get it up and running, and the various different features and functionalities that it gives you for managing all of your Windows updates and even Microsoft 365 app updates as well. So it handles your feature updates, your security updates, everything you would need to worry about there. And there is actually a brief diagram here on how that functions. So I believe I put that in the chat for you. If not, let me send that so you guys have the actual blog itself. Oh, good. Cool. Got it. Perfect. So this is the diagram, just again, how it works. Only a couple things that IT admins really have to worry about. First thing is, of course, identifying and adding your devices and setting up the service. So there's multiple ways you can set up and register your devices. By default, Autopatch will give you roughly 5 groups that you can manage your devices in. It's basically like rings from your pilot group all the way down to your last and final prod group. But Autopatch will pull any devices that are linked into a registration group and automatically kind of filter them throughout those rings, and you can even go through and manually adjust them as needed. So that's all automated for you. Once the devices are assigned to the groups themselves, then the service performs some pre-register or pre-checks there to make sure that the device is ready, has the proper licensing and policies assigned to it, and then it starts calculating and distributing the devices among the rings themselves. Finally, we then assign the deployment rings to the groups, so you can define either static assignment security groups from Azure AD, or you can have dynamic groups as well that just pull devices and automatically register them for you into those rings. Now, once they are in the rings, Microsoft, of course, will release their devices. They go through your rings and you can see them coming through for testing. And then they will slowly just start going through depending on your set deferral times in the service. The only other thing you would have to do is just really monitor the devices. So there's a lot of good reporting in there that you can utilize to see, the process of your updates, what all has come through, if anything has failed, or if there's devices that aren't even registered with the service. So this goes through, again, the full process, a lot of various pre-checks that you can have in place. This does work with co-management as well, so you don't have to just be strictly in Intune. You can still have your on-prem co-managed devices work with this service. But again, towards the bottom here, this is a long article. There is a lot to it, but it is fully kind of fledged out for you. But there is a whole section on monitoring and reporting. A couple ways you can do that in terms of all of the releases that Microsoft puts out for the month. They will be notified to you here just so you can see everything that is going to roll out to your environment. They also are very good at sending out monthly emails to whatever email you subscribe to, just letting you know what's been released, how the process has kind of played out across your rings there, and if there is anything you have to really address or take action on. Also, the good part about the service is that if Microsoft does come across an issue with an update, they immediately pull it and will address that before, of course, re-releasing it to your rings. But everything is here. You can go through and see your reports in the Intune console, both for Windows quality updates and your feature updates when you're rolling out those bigger versions there. But it does break it down nicely just so you can see exactly if everything is up to date, roughly how many devices, and if there's anything that you might need to address going forward. So again, if you haven't checked out the service, I strongly recommend it. It can definitely help you save some time once you do have it fully fledged and out and set up there. But that can be kind of a good tie-in with Patch My PC as well. So you have Autopatch handling all your Windows updates and services, and then you have us here at Patch My PC doing the same with your third-party products. So highly recommend you guys check this out as well.
Yeah, I just want to key in on something you said there, which is that like the reporting is owned by that team, right? So it is yet, which for anyone following along might feel like reporting fatigue. Now there's like three different sets of reporting for updates within this space. You have the Windows Update for Business reports, which is really tied to Azure. You have the built-in Intune reporting, but also you have the Autopatch team doing their own reporting. But what I do like what the Autopatch team is doing, because of the emails you mentioned, Spencer, it feels like a more complete solution. You can actually it's not just reports you have to go look at, but somebody's actually going to send you a proverbial subscription and tell you what's going on proactively. And then secondly, the other thing I'll tag on is that this is the only thing, Autopatch, why I'm sort of kind of giddy about it, cautiously optimistic is what I would say, is that it's the only thing that's actually crossing all the different update mechanisms. So Office and Edge and Teams were kind of allowed to go do their own thing in terms of updates, right? They're not strictly released through the Windows Update channels, whether that's Config Manager or WSUS or even Windows Update. And Autopatch attempts to sort of combine all of those things. So when we're talking rings, it's not just Windows 10 update rings, it's also Edge rings and Teams rings and Office rings, all of those things. And they will configure those rings for you for all of those Microsoft products. So it's the only solution right now that I think is comprehensive across all Microsoft technologies, which is nice to see.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. No, thank you, Spencer. All right.
Of course.
Well, with that, we are we are done. I want to thank you for joining us.
And we've got Robot Bryan.
In that way. Am I back?
I think so.